It's a subject most people won't talk about, except maybe to make a dark joke. But the reality of what's sometimes called inbreeding, particularly in isolated parts of rural America, is no laughing matter. It's a complex, painful story born from profound isolation, systemic poverty, and generations of being cut off from the rest of the world. It's not a choice, it's a consequence we rarely stop to understand. Let's journey into the Appalachian region. Tucked away in the mountains of places like West Virginia and Kentucky, you'll find communities that have been rooted in the same hollows for centuries. These aren't just towns. They are pockets of history, where families have lived on the same land, often with very little contact with the outside world. This isolation wasn't always chosen. It was dictated by geography, imposing mountains and a lack of infrastructure. When there's no road leading in and no money to build one, there's no easy way out. Poverty becomes a physical barrier, trapping people not just economically but geographically and socially as well. Now, when we hear the term inbreeding, our minds often jump to extreme, sensationalized scenarios. But the reality is usually more nuanced. It's not typically about immediate family. Instead, it refers to what happens in small, closed-off populations over many, many generations. First cousins, second cousins, and distant relatives intermarry, not out of a lack of morality, but a lack of options. In communities with no schools, no transportation, and minimal exposure to anyone outside their immediate circle, the dating pool is incredibly small. Sometimes there was little to no awareness of the genetic risks involved. It was simply the way of life, a direct result of the circumstances they were born into. The human cost of this genetic isolation can be heartbreaking. We see increased rates of certain genetic conditions, cognitive disabilities, and physical differences. But beyond the biological impact, there's a deeper, more insidious wound: the social stigma. The outside world often looks at these communities not as people with stories and struggles, but as content for a freak show. They become caricatures, their lives reduced to stereotypes for entertainment. This isn't just inaccurate. It's a form of exploitation that strips them of their dignity and humanity. It's easy to point and laugh, but it's harder to look closer and see the real people behind the labels. This isn't just a story about a few isolated towns. In many ways, the phenomenon of close-kin marriage in America holds up a mirror to our society. It reflects how we've allowed entire communities to fall through the cracks, forgotten and under-resourced. It shows us how poverty can become a prison, a sentence passed down from one generation to the next, as inescapable as a family name. It reveals our own tendency to resort to ridicule rather than asking the uncomfortable question: why is this still happening in one of the wealthiest nations on Earth? Ultimately, if we're going to talk about this issue, we need to shift the focus. Instead of sensationalizing families, we should be scrutinizing the systems that created their invisibility. The real story isn't about genetics. It's about the decades of neglect that made these communities invisible to the rest of the country, right up until the moment someone showed up with a camera. Thanks for watching and taking the time to understand this complex issue. If this perspective resonated with you, please consider liking the video and subscribing for more content that goes beyond the headlines.